in addition to mobile work, though, I've done a decent amount of front-end web work. And these days, I'm doing both of those things in React Native on the native side, and then just regular React on the website. Being able to cross over between those two things has been awesome. Why I love React. And so I've given this talk a couple times now. Actually, it's the third or fourth time. I just do this talk now, and hopefully this is my thing. So it's been really great so far. The goal of this is to just kind of, I know you all started with React at this point, right? So you're dipping your toes in. Okay. Yeah, I like to try to roll things back and just talk about React, kind of why it's a big deal, why you're using React in the first place. Especially if you're a little new to front-end development, you might be wondering, like, what is the big deal about React? Because I'm sure you've heard a lot about it, and obviously it's a big focus of your coursework right here. So I want to just talk a little bit about what makes it special and what makes it good to work in, and then we're just going to go through a practical exercise. You can all follow along, so you can also do that. So we'll just go through a pretty simple app building exercise, and we'll pause every time there's something interactive. I'll walk around a bit and ask questions. I'll try to leave it open for some more questions at the end. This is actually a whole presentation that I don't think I've ever gotten more than halfway through, which is fine. We'll get as far as we can, because you're going to keep learning after this, but I just want to make sure that you really understand the fundamentals before you move forward. Yeah, so you've all set up a React app so far, right? Well, and can remote people, can you hear me okay? Everything working? Great. See thumbs up. Okay. Cool. So without further ado then, I'm right here on my desktop. I'm just gonna create a React app. Stop. Oh yeah, let me actually bring up my presentation on my phone.
So I'm looking at your brain, okay? Is there some kind of way we can do this whole React thing without having to reinstall all this stuff? Because it takes up a lot of space in your computer.
I linked the thing to a sandbox.
So you did?
Put it in the Hilo chat.
Yeah.
Playing
But
the React experiment.
But is it on the computer or is it hosted on the website?
It's website hosted. Yeah, there are options like that if you want. There's a whole bunch of.
So you can't do it locally?
Well, if you do it locally, you do have to install all this stuff.
Every single time?
That's, unfortunately, like, yeah, there's other the way Node works with NPM, which is how you're installing all of your packages. It all gets into your Node modules folder, which is local to your project. You don't check that into source control, so that you don't have to like pass it around or save it remotely, because you can always install those packages. Other things like the way Ruby works, for example, Ruby gems will send them all to a central repository, and then I think theoretically they're shared between different apps, but don't quote me on that. I'm not really a Ruby person. But yeah, unfortunately, that's the trade-off to React. It's a great tool, it's amazing, but it only works because it's built on top of thousands and thousands of other files and other software. So yeah, you have to install this. Any other questions before I get started? Cool. All right, so my talk is called React. What's the big deal? Seriously, what's the big deal? I have a GitHub repo for this. I don't know if it's fully up to date, but I will send it out to everybody if you want to, just see a little bit. It'll contain these slides and the code that we're actually developing here. So to start with, what exactly is React? You used it a little bit, but what is it? You don't tend to hear this question asked. Essentially, it is a JavaScript library for creating views, and that really is all it is. React is just about creating a view layer for your application. So what's going on behind that layer, how you're managing all of the data that's feeding into the view and everything that's coming through from the user side, can be basically anything. React is not necessarily an entire application, but sometimes it is. It depends on what you need it for. But it is a set of tools just to let you create views. I have a slide here that says what makes React special, and you'll note the asterisk there because special doesn't actually mean unique. If you play around with Angular, Vue.js, or some of the competing frameworks out there, then you're going to find a lot of the same stuff in there, and that's actually only gotten more true true over the last few years as React got more popular, changed the way people think about this kind of stuff, and we started seeing that move into its competitors as well. So that's actually good news if you are ever jumping between those different frameworks, because they are more similar than they used to be. So one big thing is components. Everything in React, including your app itself that you're seeing, is a component. And React is very much designed around this idea that you can break things down into smaller pieces and have them do discrete things, and then another component can contain multiple components. It's all very modular like that. This is great because this encourages you to really think of your app as a whole bunch of little things that only do one thing, or maybe only do a few things that are related, rather than trying to manage this massive suite of things that are all doing everything. And it can really, if you sort of roll with it, it can really help your thinking as you're designing. Then there's JSX. JSX, we'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. The diffing algorithms and the ecosystem. So I already described components. JSX is sort of Frankenstein's monster of HTML and JavaScript, but it's in a good way. It is trying to solve this problem where before you had an HTML, and this is back in the days when maybe you're using jQuery or something like that, or even before that, you were just writing your own JavaScript, just totally from scratch. You had HTML, which was laying out your pages. It was actually being rendered in the browser, and then all of your functionality lived in JavaScript, and it had to constantly communicate between the HTML and the JavaScript in really clumsy ways. Things like you give things IDs. You'll do this a little bit in React sometimes, but like you'd have to give something an ID, and then the JavaScript would have to search through your page, through your rendered page to find that ID, and then do something with that. And you can see how if every single thing that you're interacting with in your HTML has to be accessed that way, it's so easy to introduce problems. So JSX is the way that React has tried to solve that, and I think it's done really well. It's actually optional. You don't technically need to use JSX, but it is way better than the alternative. This is probably a little out of date on the right here. This is the actual JavaScript that's being generated from what's on the left. The left is JSX. This is just pure JavaScript. And when I think React first came out, you actually had to do that. JSX didn't exist yet. And I don't know if that's still legitimate JavaScript because I never worry about this. I don't know anyone who develops in React and actually does it this way. There's probably a few people out there who are just really hardcore, don't want to mess with your JavaScript. More power to them. But you don't need to worry about exactly what's happening under the hood. React is taking care of it for you. So I mentioned the diffing algorithm. This is also a big piece of why React is so popular. It's such a big deal compared to the old way of doing things, because data changes and the UI just updates it. You don't think about it. You don't just make that happen. Previously, when you were, writing this JavaScript and searching through all of your HTML, trying to find the thing to update, and then you had to make the decision whenever your data was changing when to update all of those UI elements. And that's just an enormous amount of thinking that became hugely just detrimental to your whole process. It's really easy to make mistakes, and you had to do it all the time, every single time it changed. And that's mostly what your app is going to be most of the time. The user will do something, it will change data somewhere, that will change the way the view looks to them. And that's just how you interact with software. So React created this way of just telling when things have changed and then updating all of the components that need that change without you having to make any decisions at all, which is really great. I also mentioned the ecosystem. I don't have a slide for that. But that is another big part of why React. It's kind of popular because it's popular in some ways. It's started to build up such a groundswell of support from so many developers that you have this enormous wealth of tools to choose from if you want to do something. Probably someone out there already has a package that does it. They may not be good. It may not be maintained anymore. You still have to, pick and choose carefully. But there's so many options in terms of introducing a lot of complexity to your app without having to build it yourself. And if you have problems and you're sticking to packages that are pretty well maintained, going around, there's a lot of conversation. It's really easy to get help when you need it, which is huge. Because people like a lot of software developers like to joke that most of our jobs are error messages, but that is often true. So my days are spent entirely Googling error messages, and I really hope that someone out there has the same problem. you have deadlines. You can't dig down into the depths of every single bit of code you're working with. So that's why it's good to stick sometimes with the more popular tools because you do get that consistency. So, like I said, React is just for making views. So the rest is up to you. I've actually used the word framework a couple times to describe this, so bear with me, because there's not really a good other word for it. It's not a framework in the sense that it has a structure that it forces you to stick to. That's not how React works. It's a set of tools, basically. Like I said, you layer the actual structure of your app, how your data lives, how it gets up, how exactly it gets updated. I mentioned that updating the data updates the app, but you still have decisions about when and how your data does get updated and what kind of changes you make to it and things like that. So usually you're going to be using other tools. You may have heard about some of this stuff already, like Redux, for example, is a very popular state management tool. It handles all of the state of your data for your entire app in a way that takes a little getting used to, but it's very powerful. And then, of course, there's backend frameworks, maybe Rails or Node or Django or other things that are running on a server, that are actually powering your app that have a database, and React is just your user interfaces with them. Anytime you need to persist stuff, save stuff. Again, you can do your whole app in React potentially, depending on what you need. That might be all you need. But there's always the option to plug into something bigger, more powerful, and flexible in the backend. The thing is, this is changing a bit. React is starting to add some elements that allow you to make those changes, or to handle your data structure just with using React. Context is one of those. That one's been around for a while, actually. Hooks is a relatively new one. I still don't see it used a ton because it's kind of it's basically a way to quickly make use of state and pass props around. I'll explain what state props are soon. I've gotten to that already. It's a lightweight way to do it. It doesn't make a lot of sense in a big application, so I haven't used it a ton, but it'd be really cool for just starting up something small. You don't need to worry about any of that right now. Context of hooks, I'm not going to get into that today. It's just stuff to keep in mind because you're going to hear about them later, and that's what those are there for, just to help bring structure to your whole app. All right, great. So why don't we all open up our terminals and go ahead and create a new React app. And the way you do this now is through NPX, which is very cool. NPX is essentially, you used to have to download a Create React app, or it's called the CLI usually, but like the local tool that created this app for you, keep that updated, and NPX removes that from you, essentially just kind of grabbing it, running the latest version automatically. Unless you have an old version installed, which I discovered, it does screw things up. So that shouldn't be a problem for anything. So just know that anything, as wonderful as all this stuff I'm talking about is, you can always go wrong somehow. And that's just part of the life of the software. So let me make this bigger. Everyone see that? Yeah. Okay. Let's go ahead and NPX, create React app, and we'll call this Platoon app or whatever you want to call it. They are very specific about your naming conventions here. You can't use capital letters. I think you can only use dashes and uppercase letters, which is the point. You don't need to worry too much about what you name it. It is going to change the name of some of the files within it, but those don't usually get shown to the user. So it's good to give it some kind of a descriptive name, but you don't have to worry about it too much, and you can change it later. So this, as we discussed when I asked that question earlier, is just installing a massive pile of files. And that is something to think about with React. Sometimes in certain situations, just a little bit of simple JavaScript on an HTML page might be all you need. React is heavy. It's got a lot of files, and they can, they all need to play nice together. Usually they do, which is kind of astounding, but every now and then they don't. So the complexity of React does sometimes introduce problems, but it's just really great for quickly developing things. All right, so let's go ahead and open up our Platoon app and get into the folder. And I'm going to run yarn start. I don't know if have you all talked about yarn versus npm at all? Okay. Sometimes you'll see people tell you to do stuff with npm, and sometimes you'll tell people to do stuff with yarn. NPM they're both running NPM. Yarn is like an extra tool that they built on top of NPM to make it a little bit easier to use. NPM then incorporates some of its features, so you can kind of use either or now. I generally use Yarn just because that's what most people are doing, but just know that the commands are slightly different, but they're doing the same thing. Yarn is just taking that command and translating it right now. Cool. And now, get this out of the way. It's a little smaller. All right, and now we have our basic React app. It's up and running. What's going on now is pretty complicated, but it's all being hidden from us, abstracted pretty well. There's a node server running, a JavaScript server running that's feeding the web page, this app. It's all code that you just generated for. How's everybody doing so far?
Good question. What's the difference between Yarn start and VM start?
It's the same thing. You have Yarn installed. Yarn, I think the main thing that Yarn added was lock files. So it keeps track of the versions that you install, and then when you're sharing code with other people, the idea, theoretically, is that everyone installs exactly those versions, not just the newest versions of the packages you're using, so you don't get errors where things don't quite line up. But NPM added lock files too, so now they're kind of the same. I think there's more to Yarn than that, but that's the only thing that I knew of. How's everyone doing? Do you all have apps up and running? Any troubles? Okay. Cool. So let's take a look at how's everybody remote doing? Are you all with me? Yeah, that's great. Let's go ahead and open up Visual Studio Code, what I use, but you can use any text editor with this. It's all pretty simple. I'm going to try to fit this all on one screen. I don't know if I can do it, but I'll do my best. We don't have a very complicated app, so open up. Do that. All right, I'm opening up my entire project here. Take a quick look at the project itself. So here's your massive node modules folder. You don't ever need to touch anything in there. That's where all your third-party stuff is from. You can edit this, and everything works. Wouldn't recommend it most of the time unless you know what you're doing. The reason why it's kind of grayed out here, it's just not something that you need to worry about. Other than that, you're going to see your package JSON file. This is kind of your central file for React. It just describes everything about how your, what dependencies you're using, how your app is set up. Also, something you probably don't need to worry about. And a few other things. But what we're going to go is the source folder here. We're going to go into app.js. Just minimize the video now.
Do you mind if I then go?
Yeah, go for it. So the main file that's actually running right now in React is the index.js. Oh, you actually can see that this is exactly the old thing I was talking about. We used to do this, get element by ID. That was how you used to have to talk to your HTML all the time. So React is still using it, but only once. And you don't really have to mess with this. It's already treating this app file right here when it imports that, and then when it renders that, that's your central component. Like I was saying, your whole app is a component. And all of the stuff you put in it is going to be little subcomponents within that component. You can just basically nest those forever. So we're going to worry about app.js. And I'm just going to go ahead and change the text here. I save. And all I did was save. I did not refresh my page. React just picked that up, that change, and did it immediately. That's the diffing engine at work, and it's still magical to me. I can't tell you how cool it is that it just takes care of that for you. So much of the code you used to write was doing just that, like just making that thing change and update. And it's wonderful that React gets rid of that. So you can just focus on what you need to do, and this is going to speed up development time so much. Is everyone able to get that up and running? They're seeing the updates and everything. Cool, great. All right, let's go ahead and edit the style. So those of you who've done any kind of, HTML, any web design or development work before, you probably know a little bit about CSS. React doesn't change anything about the way HTML and CSS work. It's all still being rendered the same way classic static web page works. So the only real difference is that if you've done CSS stuff before, you might remember classes and IDs. You use those to identify your elements and change their styles. You can't use class anymore. That's now a reserved word with React. So you have to use class names. Other than that, there's really no difference. So you'll see here this file right now we're importing app CSS. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And this is the CSS that's running. Bring it up. It's actually running it's actually, controlling our styles here, the background color, this little rotation and everything. That's all happening in CSS. And it's just regular CSS. There's nothing about React that changes the way CSS works. So if we want to change, say, the background color of the whole thing, just make it like red. That also changes instantly. It looks terrible, but when it instantly make things look terrible, you can do it. Let's pick something a little bit nicer. We'll do like a gray or something. I can't read it either. But as you can see, that also instantaneously changes. All your files are being watched. There's actually a service called Watchman that's happening in the background. So any changes to anything that's going to change your display will be fresh on the page. You'll see it. You should see it right away. If you don't, something's gone a little wrong. Let's go ahead and, I don't know what this was before, something like 222. Yeah, that's close enough. All right, I'm just going to change it back so we can actually read our text again. So now I want to get into a little bit what makes JSX special, and it's this. It's when you start introducing JavaScript and dynamic stuff into your HTML, and it tries to make it as smooth as possible. It's really pretty nice. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this text here, the stuff that I just changed, and go into app.js again. And I'm going to replace this with a variable, just a regular JavaScript variable. So grab this. I'm going to make my variable here. I'm going to make it a constant, and I'll just call it text. And then make sure to put it in quotes. Now you'll see that my text disappeared. I'm not getting any errors or anything. When I want to bring it into the JSX, I just put it in some curly braces like this. And now it's back. So essentially, you'll actually see a little bit of this here too in some of the code that they've created. Anytime you see anything in curly braces inside JSX, everything in there is JavaScript, and it's just pure JavaScript. So you can do things like you can run loops of code. You want to have the same element appear multiple times. That's one option. You can check to see if certain conditions are true before you show anything, which is one of the things I probably use it for the most. And you can do things like pass around variables so that you don't have to store things like text or other important elements in your component itself. They can get that around other sources and be passed around like any variable. Is everyone with me so far? Cool. All right. I have the video down, so if anyone remote has any issues, just give a shout. It's like I can't see you anymore. So I mentioned before components. We've got a whole series of components, as many as we want. We can always break things down further. So I want to give an example of that. So let's take the header of this page and we're going to move it into its own component. So we'll have a page component. Currently we have our app component. We can keep calling it that. This is our entire app. We're going to move everything in header tags into a separate component. And then we can just use it like we would do in regular HTML. And the way we do that, I'm just going to do it in the same file for now for simplicity. We just do the same thing we're doing here. So a React component is just a function that returns JSX. That's all it needs to do. Or it can return null, but it has to return something. It can't just return undefined, which is the default in JavaScript. So, and it will yell at you if you try to do that, if you try to not return the right things. So I'm going to call it, I'm not going to call it header because we already have a header in HTML, so it won't get confusing. So I'm just going to call it, I'll just call it app header, give it a little bit more description. And I create this function, looks exactly the same as the app function. And now I'm just going to grab all this HTML here in between the header tags. Return that. And if you go on multiple lines like this, you might notice sometimes the return has a parenthesis after it. That's how you do multiple lines of JSX together. And prettier. Cool. All right, so I moved it, and right away I get an error. I didn't bring the text variable with me when I moved everything over there. So I have a couple options here. And when you're developing in React, you will see these failure warnings, stuff like that. So usually they're pretty good at telling you exactly what the issue is. In this case, it's on the exact line, which also my code editor also figured out, thanks to some plugins I have it enabled. This is really valuable. Being able to quickly figure out where you made a mistake is huge because these kind of things are going to happen all the time. So very easy to make mistakes like what I just did, where I pulled some functionality from one place to another and I didn't bring everything. Sometimes it's something as small as just a text variable. Sometimes it's something really big and complicated. So it's good to know what you screwed up. So I have a couple of options here. I can just move this text here into my new function. And now nothing breaks, although you'll notice that my page is blank because we're still showing the app. This now currently, this has nothing in it. So it's just showing this background that is totally blank. So we need to actually bring the app header in here. And the way you do that is exactly the same way that you do any HTML tag. Just the same way you do divs or images or paragraphs or anything like that. You just put it here, and it behaves the same way any HTML will do, basically. As you can see now, I've basically just recreated what I had before, but I have this extra flexibility of having this header totally on its own. We're going to get into things we can do with that in a second. How's everyone doing so far? Good? Cool. All right, so my other option, though, if I don't want to do what I just did, where I move that declaration of that variable into the new component, I can pass it in as a prop. I mentioned states and props briefly earlier. They're a huge part of how components work and how they handle data. Props are a big one. They are external values you pass into a component. That's the best way to do it. They can't be changed once they're in the component. They're totally fixed. They can be changed outside the component. And as with everything in React, when you make that change, you re-render the component. These are the props you can bring. But the component itself, when it gets props, you can't do anything to them except show them or interact with them. However, they're if they're a function, they can interact with them. We're going to show them that a little bit too. So let's change the way this works. Let's go ahead and I'm going to grab that text again. I'm going to pull it back into app. Also, there's actually a third option. I can put this declaration here at the top of the file. This is a scope question here. I got into that at all. Basically, like now I've put it at the file scope. So this entire file can now access this. Any function I declare in here is able to get text. Other files won't unless they import it from here. When I put it inside of a function like I had it before, it's now scoped to that function, and it can only be accessed in that function. Just an important thing to remember. Different languages do this differently sometimes, different like frameworks and things like that, but most follow this kind of pattern. So in our case, for whatever reason, we decided we're just going to keep it in app. We want it to be scoped into this app function. So we need to pass it into the app header. And we're going to do that as a prop. And the way you do that is the same way you actually do anything in HTML. So like here we have an anchor tag here. We're passing in class name, href, target, rel. These are all props, essentially. I don't know if that's actually what HTML calls them, but you're going to do that in React in the same way. And we're going to call them, those are how you pass the props into your components. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pass text in here. And then I'm using the curly braces again because I need to pass in the value from JavaScript. And you know, it's still not working. I also need to make sure that my app header component knows that it's getting that prop in. So I'm going to add it to these empty parentheses here, it's going to be coming in like as though you were calling a function and passing it as an argument. But I can't just put text like this. I mean, I can. It's not going to work. Because the thing is, appheader is a function that React is calling. A React component is getting called by React, and React is passing in props. So it's not passing in text right now. It's passing in an object that contains text, because I might have a whole bunch of props. So it's giving it the whole props object. So we need to put some curly braces. Well, actually, let's just keep this simple. So let's call this props. And then in here, instead of text, I'm going to pull text out of props. And now it works again. So what props is everything I pass in here. I can pass in other stuff too. Like make a second string that I'm passing in. And then here I could put in props other stuff. There's not a space there, but I can put as many things as I want in that props object, and they're all going to come in the same way. Does that make sense so far? So there's a couple ways you might see this written, though. Those of you who aren't as familiar with JavaScript, there's a couple ways to deal with an object that contains multiple things. So, and sometimes you might see something like this. You might see what's called destructuring the object at the top of a file. So we can, rather than having, we have a lot of props, you know, this whole thing's just littered with props. We don't want to put props dot in front of everything. It gets pretty confusing and just clunky. So we can pull these out of the props object by structuring right here at the top. And then I can get rid of props here. And it still works. So this is a really nice thing that's sometimes confusing to people who aren't used to JavaScript, because other languages don't always do this. But basically what I'm saying is props is an object. It contains a key text and a key other stuff. And those have some kind of a value. In this case, you know, one of them is hello, Platoon, which is hello. I want you to pull those out. I want you to keep those to me as variables. And I'm just going to hang on to text and other stuff, whatever I want. But you can actually skip this step entirely if you want. We can, instead of pulling in props, we can just put text and other stuff inside curly braces up here. Keep in mind that this is not the same use of curly braces that React is doing within the JSX. You know, before I mentioned, like, everything in here is JavaScript. Well, in this case, this is already JavaScript, all this. So everything in here is an object. We're just pulling out text and other stuff. So as you look through other people's React code, you might see it done any one of the ways I just showed you. But it's all the same thing. You get one single props object, and everything you pass in is a key within that object. And pull out. That makes sense? Okay. So you've seen now that we can pass values into a component with our props, but we can also pass in functions. And this is where it starts getting really powerful. Now we can pass in something really complicated. Maybe there's maybe you need to do an API call, and you need to get back some data. You need to change some stuff in the data. The API is not giving you the data exactly. You need it. You need to format addresses so they can show up properly. You need to do a whole bunch of things, and you don't want all of that stuff to be handled by your one little button, essentially. So what you can do is you can pass that function into a button. And that function can be as complicated as you want, because you're defining it elsewhere, somewhere where you can control it and see it and deal with it clearly. And since it's a prop, you'll notice, like, our component doesn't know what these props are. It has no idea. I'm throwing them in here. If this was a function, it would just give me back, it would just like display like, I can actually show what it would do. It's not really making any assumptions at all on what the props are. Which is actually really great. It lets you might hear something about like keeping your components dumb, or taking all the logic out of there, and that's usually how you want to build complicated apps, because it's great to have all of your logic, all of the difficult stuff that you really need to nail down the working stuff. It's going to change a lot in one central place, and then all this other stuff is just displaying it or giving it user input. It doesn't need to know about all that stuff. So you pass in, use props to your advantage to hide all that functionality from components. So in our case, let's just do something really simple. We're going to pass in a callback function. We're just going to have that function show up in letters in JavaScript. So first off, let's create a button. I'm just going to get rid of the paragraph here. And I'm going to make a button. That's a nice little built-in HTML thing for us here. And you can see my button appears here. I'll put some text in there. Just say click me. Cool. I'm still taking in these other props. You'll notice you can pull in as many props as you want, do nothing with them, and it's not going to say anything to you. So there's a lot of stuff React and JavaScript won't say to you. And right now, that's not a problem, but just keep that in mind. Like, it's saying like, okay, you brought in text and other stuff. You're not doing anything with it, but whatever. You could potentially start bulking up your code and making it a little harder to read if you don't clean stuff up like that. And there's tools that can help you do that, but just a thing to remember. So I'm just going to get rid of these for now. Go back to this. So now we have this button. Everyone able to create a button? Okay, no problem. Cool. I click it, nothing happens. The HTML button is totally fine with having no functionality. It doesn't complain. You won't get an error. We want this to do something. So when we can do that is just add an on-click handler right to the button. And inside that, we're going to put a little anonymous function, as it's called. You might see this. You're going to see a lot of this potentially as you dive into JavaScript. What I'm doing here is onClick is a function. It's actually a function prop I'm passing into the button. So what we're about to do, I'm just kind of duplicating what HTML is already doing. I'm passing it in a function so that it can call the function. This is where things can get confusing because if you're not careful, you might pass in you might pass in a call of a function. You might call the function when you pass this in, and then you're going to be passing in actually the result of the function, not the function itself. I'll show you how this happens because this is a really easy mistake to make. Even,
so what did you type? Open close curly's arrow function. Open close curly?
Yes. Let me put some actual functionality in here so you can see. And in fact, actually, since this is on a single line, I don't need to put those second set of brackets.
So are those curlies or I can't see that.
Oh, sorry. Let me make this bigger.
Okay. So it's like a better.
Is that better?
Yes, a little better. Thank you.
I need to. Okay. Yeah. So open parent. Yeah. So curly braces on the outside of the onClick because I'm passing in JavaScript. Then open parentheses, and then the arrow syntax is called the fat arrow, equal sign, and then a bracket, angle bracket. And then I have the stuff I'm trying to do. So essentially, I want to call this alert when the button is clicked. And that's going to get passed into the button, and then the browser is going to handle actually that logic correctly. So let's just make sure that works. When you click on it, you should just see an alert pop up, and you can dismiss it. The mistake that I was trying to refer to before is when you do this. When you forget about the arrow syntax, and I just pass in alert, this is one of the things that can happen. So in this case, the page reloads, and it just fires that automatically. Because I'm not passing in a function that then calls alert. I'm just calling alert. So what's happening right now is the page loads. It sees that I did this because it's inside JavaScript. It just runs all the JavaScript. It says, okay, I'm going to show an alert. Then it takes the result of alert, what that function passes back, which I think is just defined. So it's nothing. And it gives that to the button for its on-click value. So now, when I click it, nothing's going to happen. Because I just said call an alert, result is undefined, hey button, your on-click function, undefined. And it's like, cool, it's fine with an undefined function, it just won't do anything. So this is one easy mistake to make. In this case, it was fortunately very obvious because the alert popped up right away, so I know I made the mistake. Sometimes it's not going to be that easy to tell. But very easy problem to have, but also very fixable. So once we add this in, I'm now passing in a function, and that function is going to call alert when everybody with me so far? Cool. So, but let's say I want to do something more complicated than alert. I'm not going to in this example, but we want to pass this in as a prop. So let's just pull this out entirely. And instead of calling the function here, I'm gonna make a prop called handle click. I'm gonna go back to my prop syntax, props dot syntax here because I think that's just easier to understand. So now I'm going to pass into the app header a prop that handles the click. That's going to be my function. So as you can see, now we've gone back to this doing nothing. I'm not passing in handle click to this component. So handle click has a value of undefined. And again, button is totally fine with undefined as it's on click handler. It's just going to not do anything. So notice there was no error there. Again, JavaScript is often very silent when you're doing things you shouldn't be doing. And you do need to be careful that you're not making these mistakes because a lot of other languages might have seen that I'm passing something in there and said, hey, this is defined, and then it would like crash or would throw an error before I compiled or any number of other things. Because some languages are very strict about that and they really want to like check your work before you can do anything. JavaScript is not one of those languages. It's totally cool. It's just trying to, it's very much taking this web philosophy of like just try to make it work. Do your best. And so JavaScript is frantically trying to make stuff work all the time. And sometimes that's great, but sometimes it leads to problems. So here, I see nothing happens. This is undefined. So I just need to pass this in. I'm going to get rid of text and other stuff since we're no longer using them. And let's actually pass in that handle click handler. And I'm doing exactly the same thing I did earlier. Whoops. Yeah, exactly the same thing I did earlier, opening up some curly braces. I put my anonymous function in there. It's called an anonymous function because it's not named. You know, app is a named function, app header is a named function, but you can do this and not give it a name. So sometimes you'll hear that called an anonymous function, or I think there's other names for it too. So now, handle click is going into app header. This should now be defined. Let's check to see if it worked. And it did. Awesome. And if I want, I could pull out a function here. I'm just going to pull it out into the file itself. And I can call this handle click. And I can use exactly the same syntax here. Well, actually, not quite the same syntax. Yeah, because I don't use the fat arrow here. And then I can pass that in, just like so. So there can be multiple layers of sort of passing along this value that is a function. And like, let's say this was something really complicated. I wanted its own file, so just work on it there for clarity's sake. You'll do this a lot with helper functions. Then I could put it in an entirely other file, import it here, and then just pass it right in there, for example. If it was doing something more complicated, I'm showing it alert. And it still works. Just note that here's another thing JavaScript doesn't stop you from doing. This has a prop called handle click, so I'm using handle click here twice. This refers to the prop that I'm passing into app header. This refers to my function. And there's nothing stopping me from naming these the exact same thing, which you might not want to do because this can be kind of confusing. Right now, in a simple app like this, it's not a big deal, but another thing to keep in mind as you go forward. So has everyone been able to do all the stuff I've been doing? Cool. Great. All right. So now I want to get into state a little bit. I mentioned state and props. We've just done a whole bunch of stuff with props. You see how that works. You can pass things across components as much as you want. But when you want to start dealing with really managing what your application data is doing, you have to deal with state in some way. So state, unlike props, is a set of internal values, and that's managed solely within a component. They're not passed externally. And they can change. They're unlike props, they change. That's in fact probably the biggest difference, is that it's like props, but you can change them. And in order to make use of them, we're going to need to take this function, which is currently our component, and make it an actual class. Remember earlier I mentioned that the class was now reserved word for React, but you can't use it in CSS. This is why. I should also warn you, state, just like before, like when you're dealing with state changes, this is where all of your problems are going to start happening, essentially. Now you are updating data in real time in response to what your users are doing, and this is where things start to get complicated. So you want to be smart about how you handle state. And React is giving you some tools that's going to make it a little bit easier to do that. But you can still do a few things that are a little screwy that will make behavior turn very strange. And I'll try to show you a few of those just so you are aware of them. But in addition to causing all your problems, it's also going to give your app this is where your app is going to live, your actual functionality. So that kind of basic push and pull is software development in a nutshell. So let's take this function app, and we're going to change this way we're showing this a little bit. We're going to say class app, and we're going to say it extends React component. So we had already, just by creating that function and returning JSX React, figured out that we were creating a React component. But now when we're making a class, we do explicitly say, this isn't just our class, we are inheriting everything from React component. If you all talked at all about class inheritance before, so it's bringing with it a whole bunch of, life cycle functions and things like that. So if it's going to make you able to make use of it. This is actually really standard in a lot of languages. It's relatively new to JavaScript, relatively being like 10 or 15 years now, but still. It's a little, you probably won't use a lot of stuff like this except your components. So just, something to keep in mind. So now you're going to see this is starting to complain to me because we can no longer, the class doesn't just return things, the class contains functions. So all this stuff here, all that stuff we were just returning from our, what we call a stateless functional component, that's what we had before, needs to be put inside of a method or a function in order to work. And that one is render. So render is the important thing. This is the thing you absolutely have to have in any React component. You can skip everything else, but you need to render something or it will not work. So essentially, once we get back inside this render function, now we're back where we were before, and we're doing exactly the same thing as before. So if I open up my browser, I didn't mistype anything, everything should be working exactly the same. So now, though, we have this class. So a class can still, actually, just for fun, I'm going to make app header a class too. You don't really need to do this, but I want to show you just how this would change the way you interact with app header. We make class app header, and we get rid of this props thing here. This extends React component as well. And now you'll see this breaks because not inside of a render function. So to make our render function, we can grab all of this here. This code does not need to change at all. It just needs to live inside render. All right. Now, of course, I can no longer access props because this isn't a function, but I can access this dot props. Any class that extends React component, anywhere you have code in there, you can always access your props by just grabbing this dot props. It'll be there for you. And otherwise, it works the exact same way. So, since we can access this dot props, we can also access this dot state, which is our state. And like props, it's just an object. That's all it is. It contains whatever values you need to deal with. And we're going to declare it right here at the top. We're going to do this. All right, I'm not doing anything with this anymore. So before I change anything, sorry to send you on a rabbit hole. Since we're no longer passing in text into, actually, I'm just going to get rid of some of this code because we don't need it. It's a little simpler. Let's go back to what we had before where we were passing text into the app header so I can just make sure that it's working in a simple way. So let's just do a paragraph here, and we're going to say this.props.text. You will notice there's nothing because text is undefined, and again, JavaScript silently just tries to let me do what it thinks I'm trying to do. And we'll pass that back in text again as a prop. Should start taking a little code platoon. Cool. All right. So once we're back at that point, now I'm going to add state so you can actually see things change. So let's go back to this. So instead of having a text, having a text variable that I'm declaring inside the render function, I'm declaring it in the state. And I can grab it the same way I grab this dot props. I can can grab this dot state. So yeah, essentially here at the top of my file, right at the beginning, I declare a state and I give text a value. So this will be the state when the component first launches. It's not necessarily going to state that way as we move forward, as I'm going to show you in a second. But this is like my initial state for my component, and then down here in my render function, I can grab this .state.text, and I can pass that into the app header, and I get hello code just like before. So far, this is basically the same thing as we were doing before. But of course, the state can change, and no matter what state.text changes to, this is always going to pass that value down to the app header and try to render it. So let's go back to handle click. So I'm going to get rid of my external function here. I'm going to make it so this click changes that text so you can see what I'm talking about. So I'm going to go ahead and make a function here again. What I'm going to do is I want to change text value. I'm going to use this .set state, and I'm going to pass it in a new text value. Click the button. Does everyone see what I'm doing here? Inside that handle click, rather than I've got rid of the other function, I'm passing in an anonymous function, and inside that I'm calling this .set state and then passing in a new text value. I'm giving set state an object, and it contains the new value of the text. And then when I click on this, boom, you click the button. So the state changed. Just like always with React, that data updated, it saw that it updated, it changed it reloaded the whole view, and now we've got this click the button. If I refresh the page, it goes back to my original value. So that's not going to persist across page reloads. It's only right now when this iteration of the page is running, and when I click it, it changes again. That makes sense to everyone so far? Now you notice, so I called this set state. Why didn't I just do this? Could I have just done this state text equals change? Well, no, I can't. You'll notice if I click this, nothing changes. So this is the tool that I was talking about that React is trying to give you to prevent you from doing anything too reckless. So what happened there is the state actually did change. I actually did update that value. So let me add a separate button here, just so that I can trigger a change, and you'll see what happened. So I'm going to add another button under my initial button, and in here, I'll throw up another alert. You know what? Actually, sorry. Let me not do it in the header. I want to make sure I'm actually triggering a change here. I'm going to add a separate invisible variable. Okay, this could be anything, you can call it whatever. I'm just going to show you what happens when I change the state properly after having changed the state improperly. What happened was state did change, but it didn't trigger a re-render because it's not totally magic. React is waiting for this set state to be called before it actually uses that thing algorithm to check and see if anything changed. So what I'm going to do is when this gets called, I'm going to call this set state properly. I'm going to change my invisible variable to 2. Oh, that actually did work. Okay. Let me try this.
Because this when the set state was triggered, it changed everything that was changed.
Yeah, okay.
Showed everything that was changed.
Yeah, well, that's why I wanted 2 separate buttons. Yeah, here, let me, I'm trying to show you an example of where this would actually, but yes, you're exactly right. I want to show you an example of where this starts to lead to problems with your app. So let's make our own separate button here. Unclick. Wait a second. I'm going to take this new invisible change that I've done. Okay. Text here. Button. Sorry, I know I'm going a little fast. Just want to make sure this works before I tell you to follow me. Oh, okay. It's probably way down here. Yep. I'm going to put this. I'll put this button at the top so it's easier to see. The header takes up our entire page right now, so I thought it wasn't rendering, but it's actually just pushed down to the bottom. So I've created a second button here. The second button, when I click on it, is going to set the state properly, but it's going to change an invisible variable that doesn't update anything. My original button, my click me button here now, is the previous mistake I made where I just set the state directly. So when I click this, it seems like nothing's happening, right? When I go ahead and click the second button, which is not changing that value, it's not changing the text value, it's only changing the visible variable, you'll see now it updates. So my state was different, but my view didn't reflect the change in my state. And this is where things can get a little screwy. So you do need to be careful because, yeah, like I said, set state is going to actually trigger react to re-render everything, but it does not stop you from just changing the state. You basically just never want to do this. You should never reach into your state and change variable directly. You should always use set state.
Are there other things that will trigger the refresh, or it's always set state?
Yeah, if this component or inside another component it got passed a new props, or something else that was happening, that would trigger a re-render. Basically, anytime state changes, or whenever any component gets new props, then that will trigger. But it won't just happen every single time. So magical, but it's not pure magic. The way stuff works, essentially. To make it sense to everyone so far, sorry, I had a little bit of a run around there. But I just wanted to make sure to highlight this because it's just a very easy mistake to make, and I make these mistakes every single day. Or things similar to them. Cool. So we are about an hour in now. We've covered the basics. We've covered state props. We want to take like a 5-minute break and then come back and then we'll start going into a more practical example. That's good. Cool. Everybody. Thank you. Do you have any questions during this pause? So, now I'm going to turn it all over to you. I want to, so we can take everything that I've just talked through and make a slightly more advanced app. The screenshot's out of date based on what it used to look like, but essentially, I want you to make a click counter. So we've got it now so that when you click that button, it updates the state, but let's keep that going and change that over time. So just make sure that whatever you can architect this how you want, you can move things into different components however you want. Just make sure that you're keeping that counter value in state and that it's updating every time you press the button. I'm here for questions. I'll just walk around and right here. I know it's hard.
Thanks.
Cool.
Second, I'll pick up Slack up if anyone remote has any questions.
I know a few of them.
Yeah, actually, that'd be great. Documents. I was ready to do that.
Kind of marketing.
So I just start
It can be done either way. Yeah, functional is just less stuff. But this, gives you exactly the same functionality as a functional state. The whole point of the functional components is just so you don't have to write so much code, or so you also don't have access to state. It kind of forces you to be simple. Oh, nice. Okay.
I'm on. I don't know about my five.
Okay, so you are still in function. You need to make this a class to get the state.
I was in a class earlier. I report back to the team. So.
I mean, it is, but yeah, when you do a function, you don't have it. It's essentially giving you like a stripped down version.
Oh,
That's why it's called stateless functional component. It has no state, it just it's props. It's great for like a header. Show stuff.
oh, okay.
I don't do that anymore. No. Yeah. Here you want all that function. So you can go open parentheses, close parentheses. You had it before. The parentheses. There you go. And it closed. Really very simple. It's going to automatically close. So,
You do it in a separate file.
you'll want to be showing the text.
Yeah.
Probably so you can just see it. You can actually add something if you want, whatever. You can across the text. Anywhere.
Some of us might. Like here.
Yeah, not right there. That's your name tag. So yeah, there you go. Let's do that.
You work well.
You don't need to set when so you're already getting the text here. You just need to do this.props.text and we'll display. You don't need to do the text equals at the beginning, just this.props.text. But you do need to put it inside curly braces.
I'm just trying to make this like the correct.
Yeah. So you guys, that was on there. So let's do that again. And then now. Just save your file and you get it equals. Okay. Oh, sorry. Wait. Oh, yeah, I think something